For more than 150 years, the Minnesota Security Hospital has been the city of St. Peter's most prominent and most mysterious resident. Like the reclusive neighbor that everybody recognized but nobody really knows, the Security Hospital has always been the subject of deep and sometimes dark fascination. Over the years, the institution has been called by many names: the St. Peter Asylum for the Insane, the St. Peter State Hospital, the St. Peter Regional Treatment Center. In its time, the Security Hospital has been both revered and reviled, seen as a cure and an affliction, a blessing and a curse. In truth, it has been all those things, and so much more. Dorothea Dix, this nation's first great reformer and advocate for the mentally ill, once warned about the dangers of examining isolated moments of the past. "The tapestry of history," she said, "has no point at which you can cut it and leave the design intelligible." In other words, we cannot truly understand the past unless we can see the whole picture, follow the entire story woven into the fabric of the past with all its threads and subtleties and details. Those are important words to remember as we look back on a century and a half of history in these few moments. Dorothea Dix paid a visit to what was then called the St. Peter Asylum for the Insane in June of 1874. Perhaps more than anyone, she would understand that it is not possible for us to do justice to the complex, captivating, sometimes tragic, and often joyous human story that has unfolded here over the past 150 years. The best we can do is look at some meaningful pieces of the tapestry, knowing that we'll not see it all. Soon after the legislature authorized establishing the state's first mental hospital, competition to become the host city was fierce. St. Peter, itself barely a decade old, launched an all-out marketing campaign that boasted a more attractive or eligible site could not be found within the limits of Minnesota. And citizens put their money where their collective mouth was, offering an attractive incentive to lure the project. In July of 1866, the city paid $7,000 for a 210-acre farm and handed it over to the state, ensuring that the St. Peter Asylum for the Insane had found its home. The footprint of that original farm, its operations and budgets have grown dramatically over a century and a half. Today, the Minnesota Security Hospital campus consists of about 520 acres, 42 buildings, and 1.3 million square feet. Along with the physical space, our understanding of mental illness, the people who suffer from it, and how to treat it have also expanded dramatically. But that knowledge came slowly over 3 distinct periods. A temporary hospital opened in St. Peter in December of 1866, admitting a few dozen Minnesota patients and ushering in what is often referred to as the pioneer period. The north wing of the permanent hospital opened 3 years later in 1869. In these early years, patients often arrived exhausted, malnourished, and driven to wit's end by the hardships of pioneer life. For them, the primary benefits of hospitalization were shelter, food, and rest. By the end of 1872, more than 1,050 patients had been admitted to the new facility, which was already building a second wing. Only 6 of those admissions were voluntary. The rest were ordered to the hospital by a judge and escorted there by a sheriff. Not surprisingly, certain things thought to cause or contribute to mental illness in the 19th century are recognized as common factors in our own time, including head injuries, frightening experiences, especially in the military, physical illnesses, the deaths of wives, husbands, children, failed marriages and businesses, financial disasters, and the loss of homes, all recognized triggers for depression today. Back then, there were also some novel causes thought to trigger mental illness too. Things like political or religious excitement, consulting fortune tellers, studying too much, or engaging in certain amorous practices. It's fair to say that hopelessness and inhumanity were among the hallmarks of the troubling time known as the custodial period. The hospital's population more than tripled during these years. By 1957, more than 3,100 patients were crowded onto the St. Peter campus. For much of the period, psychiatry was in its infancy, and medical science knew next to nothing about serious mental illness. There were no truly effective treatments, though there were many misguided ideas. It was also a time when most of society could not see the human potential in people with developmental disabilities and could not imagine them living in the community with the rest of us. For many of those patients, St. Peter and other state facilities would become a lifelong home. With little hope or expectation of recovery, the focus was not on treatment, but control. The daily duty was to keep patients safe from themselves and from each other. Physical restraints, many of them seen as barbaric by today's standards, were commonplace. It can be difficult to look back at this sad chapter in the security hospital's history, especially for former patients and their families, or for so many kind-hearted and conscientious staff who tried every day to do their best for patients. But we must acknowledge the sobering truth that even when the intentions were good, the methods for addressing mental illness, developmental disabilities, and chemical dependency were often foolish, neglectful, and cruel. We should also remember that many good things, wonderful things in fact, happened at the security hospital during that time. There were many opportunities for meaningful work. The security hospital was an operating farm until 1969, and patients tended fields and gardens and barns. They worked in all kinds of trades on campus. There were dances and music and movies and holiday celebrations, outings to lakes and picnics and parades, books to read and literary clubs to join. There were many good times, touching moments, and caring, long-lasting relationships between patients and the staff who loved them like family. By the mid-1950s, the winds of change were blowing hard across the country and here in Minnesota. Calls for reform of the nation's mental institutions echoed in most every state and ushered in a more enlightened era that began to change the way we think about mental illness, developmental disabilities, and addiction. At the same time, there were important advances in drug therapies that showed true promise in the treatment of schizophrenia. Together, these social and medical advances triggered a tectonic shift in the way we approach mental illness, shaking the old ways and system to its core. Gradually, the focus has changed from mere custody to active therapeutic treatment, and from a lifetime of institutionalization to true healing and a return to community whenever possible. Ever evolving and often reshaped by new breakthroughs and ideas, this patient-centered focus remains the same to this very day at the Security Hospital and all of Minnesota's state-operated facilities. Recognizing a patient's dignity, humanity, and potential to lead a rewarding, productive life is the foundation of treatment at the modern security hospital. Their uniforms and roles may have changed across the decades, but the staff at the security hospital have been a constant source of compassion, innovation, and healing. Caring for the seriously mentally ill is never easy, never simple, never clear-cut, never perfect. The right way to handle a patient in crisis is only obvious in hindsight. It takes special people to do this difficult and sometimes dangerous work, and we ask a great deal of those who are willing to take it on. They must be calm when others would be angry, fearless when others would be timid, They must anticipate things no one else could foresee and take split-second action when others would be racked with indecision. These amazing, devoted professionals seldom get the credit and respect they deserve. What will the future bring for the Minnesota Security Hospital? In the short term, its physical presence will change dramatically, and in fact is transforming right before our eyes. The first phase of a $126 million expansion and renovation project is already complete. Phase 2 is underway and should be done in 2020. The new facilities are providing a much more therapeutic atmosphere and far greater safety for patients and staff. What lies farther down the road, we cannot know for certain. We can only take our place in front of the loom and weave the next chapter into the tapestry of history, as Dorothea Dix so beautifully put it. Just as those who came before us and started this important work, we cannot know how history will judge us, the decisions we make, or the actions we take. We only know that we have come far, that we continue our work with a sense of purpose and optimism, and that there is much farther to go.